Okay, good evening and welcome. Before we get started, I would just like to let people know that we have a series of meetings this evening. We will be having a special meeting prior to our work session, which will also include a public hearing. So we will be gaveling in and out of a series of shorter meetings before we start the work session. So I will now call the November 3rd special meeting of the Lane Community College Board of Education to order. In order to continue conducting meetings in a manner that will help to combat the spread of COVID-19 and promote the safety and well-being of our community, this meeting is being held remotely. I'd like to remind board members and staff to keep themselves muted and to use the raise hand feature when you would like to speak. Please do not use the chat. That is reserved for tech communication. Board members are also asked to have their video turned on if they are able, so you are visible to the viewing public. Donna, can you please take the roll? And I'll start by saying Mike Eister is excused tonight for another board meeting, and he will hopefully be joining us at some point in the evening.
Okay, Holly Johnson.
Present.
Angela Van Kraus.
Present.
Austin Folnegi.
Present.
Steve Mattel.
Here.
Rosie Pryor.
Here.
Lisa Fragola.
Present. Thank you. So we will start our series of meetings with the acknowledgement of Homeland, and Steve Mattel is going to read that for us this evening. Steve?
Thank you, Lisa, and welcome everybody. We begin our meeting with the acknowledgement that the land we are on, that the land we are on is the traditional homeland of the Kalapuya people. The Kalapuya were stewards of this very land for over 14,000 years before their traditional way of life was forever disrupted and destroyed. We start our meeting with humility and reverence for the original inhabitants, the Kalapuya.
Okay, thank you. So I am now closing the November 3rd special meeting of the Board of Education, and I will now call the public hearing for considering the use of the CMGC design delivery method for Building 12 to order. The CMGC is the construction manager, general contractor, design delivery method. The purpose of this public hearing is to hear public input on considering the use of this design delivery method for Building 12. We will only be accepting public comment during this public hearing on that specific subject. So according to Board Policy BP 320, we also do not respond directly to issues raised by the audience, but we'll refer those issues to the president for appropriate action. However, during the public hearing, we do consider the testimony that we hear in that special meeting that we will be taking action on this subject. I believe we do have one person who has signed up for public comment. To participate in public comment, you can go to the Board of Education website and follow the link to board docs and the sign up link. You can also go to the Lane website and click the board meeting feature posted at the bottom of the page before each board meeting. You will enter the board meeting as an attendee, but you will then be moved over to the meeting as a participant when it is your turn to speak. The meeting host will unmute your speaker and you may start your video if you choose. Please keep your comments to the 3 minutes allotted to each speaker. So at this point, I believe we have Sean Cox, who has signed up to give public comment. Is Sean here?
Madam Chair, Sean Cox is not in attendance this evening.
Okay, thank you. And I do not see anyone else in the attendees. And so I believe we have no public comment during this public hearing. Is that the case, Brett?
That is correct.
Okay, great. So I will now adjourn the public hearing for the considering the use of the CMGC design delivery method for building 12. And I am going to open the special meeting for action items. So we will now open the special meeting for discussion and action on considering the delivery method of the CMGC method for building 12. And I believe we have a motion from our Vice Chair, Rosie Pryor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that Lane Community College use the construction manager, general contractor, design delivery method with a guaranteed maximum price for the renovation of building 12.
I second that.
Second.
Okay, so moved by Rosie, seconded by Austin, and I also heard Angela there. And I will turn it over to Tom. Tom, did you want to address the board at all before we begin?
No, I think with that motion, I assume everybody's read my preparation of the draft findings. Appreciate this. I think it's an exciting project. I think the one unique thing is we do have this one being advertised currently for the CMGC. In order to keep this project moving, we're trying to get ahead of the holiday schedule to get that group on board. So I'm open for questions and happy to answer any questions from the board.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments from board members? Holly?
Tom, I just want to thank you for such a thorough presentation and report that you prepared for the board. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Anyone else? Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands at this time. So we have a motion on the floor to approve the recommendation from staff to use the CMGC design delivery method with a guaranteed maximum price for the renovation of building 12. Donna, can you call the roll for that, please?
Holly Johnson,
Yes.
Angela Van Kraus,
Aye.
Austin Fullnagy,
Yes.
Steve Mattel,
Yes.
Rosie Pryor,
Yes,
Lisa Fragola.
Yes, that motion carries. So we have approved the CMGC design delivery method. Thank you. All right, so I am going to adjourn our special meeting, and I will now call the November 3rd work session of the Lane Community College Board of Education meeting to order. Donna, could you please let the notes stand that we took attendance or roll call at an earlier session, and that Mike is currently still not here for the work session. Okay, and we have some really great topics to discuss tonight. I'm pretty excited for an opportunity to dive into some really great topics. We're going to start off with the facilities master plan. And I believe Jennifer Hayward is here to discuss that with us.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for having me here today. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Oh, Brett, could you enable screen sharing?
You should be good to go.
Okay. So first of all, I want to, for those who are new to the board, let you know that we do have a facilities master plan. It was adopted by the board in 2020, and it is online. And here's a link you can go to later. It was created over a 2.5-year period from late 2017 to April 2020. And the major activities that went into its creation was we did a capital renewal engineering study. So that's where an engineering firm went through all of our buildings and looked at all of our systems and developed a list of things that needed to be replaced now, like roofs and HVAC, et cetera, and things that would need to be replaced over the next 10, 15 years too. And they put all of that together with cost estimates. We did a really detailed space analysis, and we had lots of campus input into what people needed to keep their programs running and their services running. And then we did some vision planning on how we want the campus of the future to look. And then a lot more campus input and board input. So a summary of the findings: the building deferred maintenance was about $100 million. Lane, you won't be surprised to hear that Lane has 50-year-old infrastructure that needs a lot of work. Several academic programs and services are in buildings that really haven't had a lot done to them in the last 50 years. So their ability to offer education and services that they need to do is difficult. Classroom technology is updated. We did our space analysis based on an FTE, a full-time equivalency student of 11,000. So that's the optimal amount that the college wants to target. And with that level of student population and 25% online learning, the college was only short, the college was short 37,000 square feet, but we really only need 5,000 new square feet, while we could use 32,000 square feet more efficiently. A lot of people felt like exterior spaces, the campus navigation is confusing and dreary. Safety was a big issue for a lot of people, and also our climate action plan and sustainability. So for the vision plan, I'm gonna go to this link and just show you a few pages from it. This is the facilities master plan. This was our plan for visible sustainability. And there were, some examples. Our consultant team put in some examples of other colleges and universities who have visible sustainability that give us something that we can work towards. These are aspirational visions of main pathways in campuses that help with navigation and wayfinding, and just help kind of provide a sense of place to a campus. And then this gives more detail on the main pathways plan. Art as a way of enhancing our campus was one of our visions. And so these are pictures of the art already on campus, and then these are the vision for where more art could go. This part are some aspirational views of embracing the surrounding forest and bringing more trees into our inner campus. So ways that could look. And then here are the plans that were drawn up in the master plan for where more tree cover could go. And so, yeah, I just wanted to show a little bit about the vision plan so you could get a taste for what that was about. And so when all was said and done, the master plan came up with a series of projects that included about $200 million for building modifications, including taking care of a lot of that deferred maintenance, and then renovations for the programs that needed it the most. There's $2 million allotted for infrastructure, and that will not cover all of the infrastructure needs that we have, but the intent was for it to pay for it for us to do a study so that we can understand the cost of what all we really need to do for infrastructure, and then take care of kind of a small amount of that. The exterior projects included parking lots, wayfinding, athletic fields. The safety, again, is a small amount, but we'll talk more about the details later, but it's basically to cover some safety items that wouldn't be included in the buildings projects that because safety will be included in all of these buildings projects and the exterior projects. And similar to climate action plan sustainability, the 800,000 isn't really a substantial amount either, but the thought is that climate action plan and sustainability things will be included in all of the projects in this bucket and this bucket. So this is just a little bit extra to cover some of the areas that wouldn't be included in the other areas. And then $1 million for classroom technology, and that all added up to about $220 million of projects, worth of projects designated in the master plan. So to go into each of those areas in a little bit more detail, the master plan provided a prioritized approach for addressing 59% of that 107 million in capital renewal or deferred maintenance. I kind of use those terms interchangeably in this presentation over a 10 to 15 year time period. The programs and service upgrades included are listed here, and I won't read them out, but the ones that are in yellow font are the ones that are included in the 2020 bond. Space needs, the master plan provides a roadmap for meeting those space needs that I talked about. We're adding the square footage of the health professions building and then renovating the buildings shown here for better utilization of space. And then demolishing the third level of building 17 is also in the master plan. Here's a little bit more detail on those projects to improve the exterior of the campus. Improving those pathways from the north, south, and east, improving the parking lots, doing some parking lot maintenance, and then sports field maintenance and improvements. Again, kind of what I already said about the safety budget, that it's to fill in the gaps, to do safety things that aren't already. So for example, building 1 isn't included in the bond, but we could use some of this $1.2 million to do some of the safety things that need to be done in that building. Whereas building 15 is included in the bond. So the safety things would be done under that project itself. And same with climate action, sustainability, this 1.2 million is the same idea as the safety. It's a bucket to do some things. And right now we're focusing on LED lighting and HVAC controls that we wouldn't do in another project that's already planned for the bond. So how are we going to fund all of this stuff? Because $219 million is more than the $121 million bond that we passed. So this shows the plan for that. We already had $8 million in capital construction from the state. We passed the $121 million bond. We've been getting seismic grants that will go towards that, and you can see down at the bottom, we're going to continue applying for those and hopefully getting them. And we're going to continue applying for those state capital construction monies and hopefully continue getting those too. And then the other part of the plan is renewing the 2008 bond in 2024. And so that all adds up to about 240 million, which is a little bit more than that 219, but with escalation and everything, it'll even out. And then I think this is my last slide, but this just goes over the exact projects that I just talked about that are included in the 2020 bond. So these are the master plan items that are getting taken care of with the bond. And again, I won't read these off, but I'll just be quiet for a moment. And I think this is, oh no, I was going to say I think that's my last slide, but this should be my last slide. The rest of the bond projects that from the master plan.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. We do have this in our board packet as well, so great, we can now see each other. So I am going to open it up to board members for questions or comments, discussion about the master plan. Anyone? Steve?
Thanks, Jennifer. Couple questions. And maybe this is actually a question for Marge, I don't know. Is the standard strategy for community colleges to fund deferred maintenance via bonds, or are there other strategies that are employed to keep up with that deferred maintenance?
Marge, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so it's a multi-prong approach, Steve. We get practically nothing, zero from the state. We basically are given a funding that lets us operate. Beyond that, you have to go out for a bond, right? Which some of our colleagues have not been as fortunate as Lane, and they can't get a bond. So that means, what do you have left? When you develop your operations budget, you have to put a certain amount of money in there. And later on in another presentation, you'll see a little bit, you'll hear a little bit more about that. So you've got to put a percentage away when you build your operational budget, right? And this is a mixed bag for us, because on one hand, when we went out to talk to the voters, we said that if we got the bond, we could lower the amount and save money, in a sense, in the operations budget. But on the other hand, you just saw a picture, it doesn't cover everything. So we're still in a position where there is no money coming from Salem to help us. Now, you do know, though, that 8 million, remember, about every third line, Jennifer showed you $8 million. That's a one-time capital construction. Every 4 years, you're allowed to go for it. That's not changing light bulbs, fixing cement. That's just, I'm going to build or fix a whole building. Does that answer your question, Steve?
Well, I guess the other part of it would just be, are we adequately funding through our own budgeting process, not through bonds or state money, but through our tuition or however it is that we set that money aside? Are we, in your mind, are we adequately handling that, or do we need to visit that issue?
We are not. We are not. When I got here, I saw the result of we are not. And it's no one's fault, Stephen. It's just that you're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and I think Rosie's hand's up. She's probably going to address this. I mean, she's watched this ball get tossed back and forth all these years. Rosie?
May I?
Yeah, go ahead, Rosie.
Yeah, the blunt answer to your question, Steve, is in the 10 years I've been on this board, the budget has always been prioritized to the classroom and the student, and not to the bricks and mortar. And so, and we're perpetually underfunded operationally. So taking precious operations funds and setting them aside in a savings account to fix broken buildings just has not been justified by boards along the way. So, and we don't get funds from the state for capital.
So I have myself in the queue. I know that we also have another presentation on deferred maintenance, which I'm also interested in hearing about, but I had some questions about the facilities master plan. From looking at the projects that are going to be moving forward soon, I can really begin to see how the main pathways and wayfinding vision is beginning to be implemented. And I think that is very exciting. The things that I am curious about, and I'm not quite clear on the progress that we're making, is this idea of embracing the surrounding ecosystem, the surrounding forest. And I know there's been some, the plan looks at bringing that in closer, making the campus more green, less like visibly cement heavy. And I'm wondering, in these projects that we have coming, what progress are we going to be making on that, as well as the investments in art as a reflection of culture?
Yeah, and I saw Tom turned on his screen. So if you want to go ahead and jump in, Tom, you can feel free.
Thanks, Tom Goodhue, Capital Construction Manager. I'll start with the art piece, because we have our first installation of a new mural up on Building 18, which just went in. There are a couple of other proposals in. There's one for the center building that's being we're trying to refine, and that committee is looking at a few others. So that's one that's kind of underway, and we continue to look at opportunities for that. As far as bringing the forest into it, with each of these, and when I talk about some of the bond, you'll notice a lot of large land areas, a couple acres at a time that we're going to be looking at, trying to take care of, bringing that in, cleaning up the landscape, and bringing it more native types of planting than a lot of what has kind of been infilled, has either become overgrown or combination of that and non-native. So it's not really quite where we need to be. Hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you. It seems like in the next couple of years, we'll make a lot of progress on some of this.
It'll take 3 to 5 years, but the bulldozers will be here before you know it.
Okay. I have Rosie in the queue, followed by Angela.
Sorry, that was an old hand.
Okay, thank you. Angela?
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation and all the information. I have a question about, oh geez, now navigate back to it. I pulled up a bunch of stuff on my screen here. So I'm looking at the climate action plan sustainability line item. On slide 5, it says $800,000. Later on, it says on slide 11, 1.2 million. And both of those numbers seem kind of low, unless there's something else that I'm sort of not following in terms of sustainability in the 2020 bond. I think we talked about this a few times after the bond passed. In particular, I see from September 2020, we have a document that indicates that we'll have a minimum of 1.5% of the bond amount on renewable energy, which would be about $1.8 million. And so I'm just wondering sort of how all those pieces fit together.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. I think the 1.2 on the later slide might have been a typo. I apologize for that. And then as far as the 1.5 for renewable energy goes, that was embedded within each of the project costs. So the Building 12 project had 1.5%. So I didn't call that out because it was already embedded within each of the project costs. And Tom does definitely have a line item for that within the 2020 bond. So that's covered. And you're right, the 800,000 in the master plan is pretty low, but again, that's because, you know, for example, the new health professions building, it's going to be a LEED building, hopefully LEED Gold. So each of the projects that we're doing will definitely incorporate sustainability and climate action plan. Building 12, since it's a remodel, may not be certified LEED, but we're definitely using LEED principles to guide the development. So we're working on climate action goals and sustainability within every project. So that 800,000 was just a little bit of an extra padding, I guess, to cover some things that wouldn't get done.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, Steve?
Quick question, that 219 million that you quoted, Jennifer, does it include expected inflation in construction costs? And if not, we should probably get that number, right? Because I know from work at the U of O, right, we're seeing 5, 6, 8, even higher % increases annually.
It did to some extent, but it's not tracking what we're seeing now. So it's probably a little bit low. So that's why, you know, it's good that we see the fundraising for 240 at least, but we might need to escalate that a little bit further. That's a good point, considering how crazy things are right now. And they may only get worse.
Anyone else? Steve, did you have another comment? All right. Thank you for that presentation. I think one of the first actions or conversations that I had as a new board member after recently being appointed was a presentation on this plan, which we then eventually adopted. And so it's very exciting for me to see some of it coming to fruition. And I'm excited to get to see more of that. Marge, was there anything that you wanted to add on this topic?
No, Jennifer did a nice job. Thank you.
Great. So I am going to move us on to deferred maintenance, which also will be presented by Jennifer Hayward and Zach Evans.
All right, thank you. I'll share my screen again. So like I was saying earlier, I kind of used interchangeably the terms deferred maintenance and capital renewal needs. And then here we're going to talk about 10-year renewal needs. So, and that's from everything from deferred up through 2030. So what we have with our engineering study is they're now showing $133 million in our 10-year renewal needs, about $3 million in needs for parking lot maintenance. Our exterior and our infrastructure, we haven't done those engineering studies yet, and we need to do those. I talked about that a little bit in the last presentation. So we need to do those studies so we know how much those are going to cost. But you are probably all familiar with some of the crumbling staircases and concrete that's in really bad shape that we have around campus. So we do need to quantify those costs. And then the athletic fields, we have about $3 million in maintenance 10-year renewal needs as of right now. And that totals at least 139 million pending those new engineering studies, which I mentioned. And this just shows you, this is probably hard to read on your screen, but it shows you a report from that building engineering study that we had done. And it kind of gives you an idea of how we look at things. So this is for all of campus. You can do one of these reports per building. But these are the categories that they tell us about the costs. Vertical transportation means elevators, and the health and equipment group is kind of a catch-all, but it means basically asbestos abatement and then certain equipment that's in some of our buildings, like walk-in freezers, for example. That's not in any of these other categories. And then the non-recurring project needs are projects that they've identified that should only need to happen once. They're not things that would have a cycle where you would need to do a replacement once every 10 or 20 years. And then this is our current deferred renewal plus 2021. So all of that equals 76 million, which is a little better than the numbers we've been talking about. And then when you go out for the life of the master plan, though, that 10 years, you see 137 million. But I said 133 on the last page because we've already done about $4 million worth of those projects. So I subtracted those out to get the 133 million. And then I'll just point out one more thing. They also calculate a facilities conditions needs index, which is shown here as 0.24. And I'm going to explain what that means on this slide. So facilities conditions needs index is your 10-year renewal need. So that's that 133 million divided by the current replacement value of all of your buildings. And lanes, our edited one is 0.23 because I use the 133 million rather than that 137 million. And this scale here, this graphic shows you basically how we're doing. So we're right now in the fair category, which isn't bad. And that's where a lot of colleges are. We should, hopefully once we do everything that we talked about in the master plan, we'll be in the good category, but right now we're fair. And this is what we started talking about with Steve's question and Marge's answer. And the last presentation was what LCC has allocated through our general fund for major maintenance over the last 6 years. You can see those numbers here. They're pretty low, as we talked about. Experts recommend budgeting about 2% of the current replacement value of buildings for capital renewal every year. And so for us, that would be about 11 million. And then this is an estimate, but our bond funds over the years, from our 98 bond to this bond have been helping out at a rate of about 5 million a year. And so I'm recommending that our annual major maintenance budget be closer to $3 million a year. As Marge alluded to during the last presentation. And that is my last slide.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions or comments from the board? Okay, well, I'll put myself in the queue. I guess I'm wondering, I mean, it all seems like it's a very fluid, ongoing thing. It's kind of like how you have to keep cutting your grass in your yard. I know that's a simplistic analogy, but Tom's actually nodding his head yes. So we have to keep up on these things in a 10-year period. One of the things that we communicated to the public was that we would decrease our deferred maintenance costs, or we would take a bite out of it using some of the bond dollars, and that would help to to allow us to continue to prioritize the mission of the college focused on education, as Rosie mentioned earlier. So I'm wondering, have we done that?
Well, we have, in the sense that, when we looked at the deferred maintenance or the major maintenance allocation over the last 5 years, there were some years that it was $1 million and 2.5 million. And then in the last couple of years since the bond passed, it's been more like 500,000, 700,000. So it has been reduced some.
Okay, Tom, did you want to add to that? And then I saw Marge's hand.
Yeah, I'll just, we'll get into how much money, but we have a lot of bond dollars. We haven't been able to invest those quite yet. So it sets us up. And as you said, you got to cut your grass. You don't do it once a year. You don't do it once and never again. And these things things get older. So there's more investment. The bond will do an awful lot to bring that facilities condition index up. As Jennifer said, it is a common, most universities are in that fair category. Most higher education, most schools are as a whole. Hopefully we can get to the higher side. We're pushing the lower end. Very few institutions are at that top level. So we are making progress toward it, and give me a couple of years, we'll have a better report.
Okay, thank you. Marge, did you want to add to that? I saw your hand.
Yeah, just a little bit. The one thing that was impressed upon me when I got here, because even I didn't understand the depth of the maintenance needs at the very beginning, was because of the lack of routine maintenance, the facilities deteriorated much more rapidly. And we use more energy. I mean, if we really say we want to be sustainable, and what we really have to do is make sure that we're having routine maintenance. So yes, since the bond, we have lowered the amount, but the more I'm working with Tom, the more I'm realizing, though, we can't just let the routine maintenance side of that house go, because otherwise it'll cost us more when we come back later. It's cyclical.
Okay, thank you. Steve.
Two questions. So Jennifer, is there a preventative maintenance program at Lane?
Yes. I don't have those numbers today about how much we spend on that, but I could get that for the board and kind of a summary of the activities that we do. But yes.
That, at least for me, it would be useful to see that and get a sense of how that is spent out in proportion to our deferred maintenance amounts. And then the other question is, when you showed us that facilities condition, I only just had a moment to look at it. I didn't see seismic broken out there. Is that handled in a different report, or did it just go too fast and I didn't see it?
No, you're right. Seismic wasn't included in that report, and we do have that information in a separate report.
Does that I'm going to imagine just that since a significant portion of our buildings were constructed prior to sort of the general awareness of how severe a seismic risk we have in the Northwest, that we are essentially underbuilt for the risk that we will that we face. Are those numbers are those concerns baked into the $219 million plan?
Yes, yes, they are, because for the most part, we're getting seismic grants to cover the seismic. Sometimes those grants don't cover everything we need them to cover. And so we have to use either some of the bond dollars or the college major maintenance dollars. For example, we're doing building 19 this year, and we got a $2.5 million grant for that. And the college is having to kick in that's about that whole entire $700,000 that we were allocated this year is to spend on that project.
Well, let me just rephrase my question. So it's not so much about, do we have sources of money to help us with our seismic concerns? It's more about, have we, fully identified them and laid out the potential costs to rectify?
Yeah. Thank you.
So Jennifer, would you be able to follow up with that information for the board?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think we'd all be interested in seeing that information. Is there anyone else that has a question or an observation or something they'd like to explore? All right. I am going to go ahead and move us on to an update for the Bond Oversight Committee. So this is we're getting the same information that the Bond Oversight Committee got, and we'll also hear a little bit from Tom about their recent meeting. Tom?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is pretty much the same information that was presented a couple of weeks ago at the Bond Oversight Committee. That was our third Bond Oversight full meeting. We're starting to get our feet on the ground with that. I think it's taken a little bit to understand what their charge was and exactly what the intent of the bond was and what we're trying to do. We're early in the process, so we're developing how to communicate, what the reports are, and evolving some of the projects. So that's been an interesting piece. I think, our meeting last month was really great. I presented some of the same projects that I've included in this packet, and I had some really great questions back from some of the board member or the committee members there. One of them was about how we're dealing with some of this maintenance items, and in particular, there was a question about building 12 that we've talked about a little bit tonight, and we'll get to more. But one of the committee members says, is it really worth investing in this old building, or should you look at tearing it down and building a new one? And since then, I've talked with the design team, and we're taking a more serious look at it. So it is, it's doing that right thing. And how do we address these kind of things? They've, again, looking at what the bond dollars are, where we're spending it, making sure we're on those core things that Jennifer talked about were brought up in the master plan. That's part of what they're doing. So I think that's a really great item. I think one of the other things that, if you look at the spreadsheet, which is my bond quarterly report, one of the things that's been updated with the state funds, and between the other things, we've already leveraged to close to $150 million. We've leveraged this $121 million to that much additional funds between the way it was bought and some state matching funds and other grants. So that's really exciting. And I think that's been one of the things that, when Jennifer talks about getting these other state matches, or whether it be for the seismic grants or for these capital funds, those groups, the state, they look to make sure we can backstop all of those funds. As we move forward, we hope to, we continue to look for other funds as well. Already talking with folks on the academic side that are saying, hey, you know, if you can put money into the capital side, I can go find other educational grants that'll help support us. So we're really looking at trying to leverage the fact that we have some cash on hand is really opening the doors for an awful lot of opportunities to improve the education. So with that, I'll pause and see if there are any questions, because I'm going to assume you've had a chance to look at all that good stuff I put out there, and then I can show pretty pictures if you want.
I will admit I enjoyed looking at the maps and the designs. It's quite exciting. Are there any questions or comments from board members? Marge, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Just that, I've been at the bond oversight committees, and you can see the growth and the transition. These folks really are understanding their charge. They're asking phenomenal questions, and Tom gave a great example of one. So I think board, you've done well with creating this committee. They're taking their charge very seriously, and they really look forward to giving you a report on how we as a college, we are doing at spending the bond dollars on what the taxpayers believe that we should be. And I think that will start more, I would say, Tom, in January, when there's more to show, correct?
Yeah, that's what we're targeting with. And just another item to that, when we formed the committee, we're assuming a 3-year term for the committee members, but we did stagger the groups into thirds. So we have a group that their term will expire in January again. Since we formed it, we're reaching out to that group to see if they'd like to continue on and take on another term. And we'll be bringing that information to the board in the next month or two to ratify those or decide on a process should we need to replace somebody.
Okay, that's really helpful to know, because we will start reaching out to our budget committee members as well, and finding out who's going to continue, and then initiating that posting for positions, which we've agreed to do as a board. So it would be helpful to kind of get that all out there at the same time.
I think we've asked them to respond to us by the end of the month.
Awesome.
So, and one of the people that is on that 1-year term is a student government representative. So what we might do is suggest that we have that student government just continue an appointment rather than you recertifying each year or thinking about that. So.
Okay, great. Austin.
I'm really glad to hear that different thoughts like, hey, should we tear down an old building and build a new building? Because it's really fascinating looking at the cost analysis of all of that, and especially long term. What was the building number that was being discussed about?
That's building 12, which is big machine technologies building, which is really cool space frame, great old building, but it also has some really unique challenges. So
absolutely,
we'll be excited to see.
Absolutely. What would be like the time frame of those calculuses? Like essentially understanding, like, okay, if we were to do this, this is the time to do it, because it either evens out or there's a net benefit. What's like the time frame of that? Like maybe a suggestion such as that.
This month.
Cool.
I mean, literally, we're costing it out right now in another week or two, and then it'll be a few rounds of checking those guesses. But we're moving quickly. We want to get a CMGC on board and get their take on it as well. So it might be the end of the year before we do that, but as we're refining the program. So thank you. I know, Austin, you got to sit on that committee once, so great team.
Absolutely, yeah. And I just briefly want to say to the board, like, I know it kind of sounds counterintuitive, but having been on the committee, having been on Klamath Community College Board, where I saw the pricing of brand new buildings and building brand new buildings from scratch, it's it's one of those things that short term, it doesn't quite make sense, but long term, it really does. So I just want the board to be kind of open to that idea. And I look forward to that, kind of the calculus of all that.
Me too.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much, Tom. It really is exciting. I know it is going to be 3 to 5 years, but we get to see it happen. Yeah.
Just a couple of things, as you plan, come probably February, March, we'll start to be bringing some of the construction contracts to you for approval. So you'll start to see, and then come April, May, we'll start to actually get construction things underway. So you'll be hearing more from me. Don't worry.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, we'll move on to our last discussion item for the evening, which is board policies. And I'm going to turn it over to legal counsel, Michael Blade.
Great. Brett, would you be able to share the crosswalk? And so we're back after a month hiatus. I know you missed it. Doing board policies. The good news is these are the last 4 board policies in section 2, which deals with the sort of organization of the board and the functioning of the board and things like that. We'll be moving on to general institution is what they title section 3 in December. I assume we're going to do board policies in December. So if we are, we'll be on to section 3, the 3000s. So we've got 4 here. I think they're pretty straightforward. I don't think there's a whole lot of difficulty here for you all will understand these very well. The first one is 2725, has to do with member compensation. There is not a lane analogous policy. It outlines the fact that, and I'm sure all of you are aware, you're not getting paid to serve on the board in any kind of salary or honorarium or anything like that, but you are entitled to have your expenses reimbursed. If and when we can travel again and do things and meet in person, et cetera, there will be, you are able to get your travel reimbursed. And so that's really, I mean, this policy is only, looks like one sentence, a couple lines. So there's not much to it other than those 2 things. You don't get paid for your service, but you do get reimbursed for your expenses.
Okay, so we'll start with that short one. Any questions or comments from board members? Angela?
It seems like that's aligned with current practice, so it makes sense to me to codify it in policy.
Agreed. Anyone else? So I'd like to suggest we refer it to the consent agenda if no one has any changes or considerations regarding board policy 2725, Board of Education member compensation. And let's go on to the next one.
All right, the next one is 2735, and this one kind of puts the meat on the bone for your reimbursement for travel expenses. Those of you who work or have worked in the public sector in Oregon, I don't think any of this is going to be news to you. How you get paid, how your per diem, if you're overnight, if you're a part of a day, if you have a travel day, et cetera, you get paid pretty much like any public sector employee would be paid for workplace travel. So again, once we start, hopefully, knock on wood, get back to a little bit of normalcy, and you all may go, someplace to an OCCA event or something, stay overnight, you get your hotel, your per diem is set forth here. If you drive, it talks about your mileage. If you go someplace and you fly, it talks, it reimburses you for that. So again, most of you, and even in the private sector, this is not so uncommon. So it's basically just the rules behind how you are reimbursed for travel.
And I would just like to note that one is legally advised.
Yes.
Angela?
Thank you. I feel like the one time that I traveled for the board, the college, Donna, arranged everything. And I'm wondering if that practice would be allowed under this policy rather than, board members individually scheduling their travel and lodging and then being reimbursed. I don't see a provision for that. So I guess
Yeah. Yes, that would be absolutely advisable. And in fact, I would suggest, unless you just like making travel arrangements, I would suggest that that's what you do. Especially if there's a group going, it's often easier for one person to make the group arrangements. So yeah, that's perfectly acceptable. I suspect I've never had to travel at Lane so far, but I would guess, knowing Donna, that knows all of this backwards and forwards and can probably fill out that report for you and get you any money that you're due at the end of the travel. So that would be perfectly fine under this policy.
Any other questions or comments about board policy 2735? Angela, did you have another one?
Yeah, I'm sorry, just following up. I think maybe I'm still not clear that it's okay for this language allows for the college to sort of manage that whole process rather than individuals getting reimbursed after.
Well, the college is reimbursing you. So if the college is going to do the work, they can pay for things on your behalf that you wouldn't. So let's say you're flying someplace, they could pay for your airline ticket, your rental car if necessary, and then you wouldn't get reimbursed for those things. Obviously, your hotel, you wouldn't get reimbursed for those things. You would get reimbursed potentially for your per diem. You'd have to have receipts, etc. So you would submit those to the college, and you'd only get reimbursed for the per diem. Now, alternatively, if you wanted to make your own arrangements, you could make all of your own arrangements, submit your receipts for your flight, your rental car, your hotel, your food, etc. And an expense report will be filled out for all of that. And if you had paid for all of that, you would get reimbursed for all of that. So it's not, yes, it's perfectly fine for the college to do it on your behalf because it's all coming out of the same pot of money. It's all coming as a reimbursement from the college.
Does that need to be specified in this policy?
Well, it talks about the very first sentence says the college will reimburse the Board of Education members for out-of-pocket travel expenses incurred during travel related to college or board business. I mean, if you want it to have a sentence specifically saying that the college may also, plan the travel and prepay it on your behalf, we could certainly add that. OCCA didn't think that was necessary. I don't believe it's necessary, but I'm happy to include it if it makes everyone feel better.
Austin?
It would make.
Oh, go ahead, Angela. Did you want to finish that thought?
I was just saying, it would make me feel better, but if nobody else feels like it's necessary, then I won't push it. Thank you.
Austin?
So board business, does that also include like board meetings? So let's say like if we meet in person, I'm on the east part of the county, I'm 40 miles away. Like, is that considered board business? I guess I'm just asking, is that language broad enough that it also includes that? Because if we have someone who lives on who's a board member, who's on the far east of the county or over in Florence, the board business does not include like a work session, a board meeting, an executive session, and so forth, right?
So there are guidelines from the General Services Administration about that. So
Yeah.
It depends on how far away you're coming, right? So if you live in Coburg, it's probably not going to cover you to drive to Lane Community College for an in-person meeting. If you live in Florence, you're going to get reimbursed for that. So I'd have to go and look and see what that distance is. But as I recall, it's something like 30 miles. So if you're 40 miles from campus, then, you may qualify for that. But yeah, board meetings would be, and work sessions would be, that would be college business for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
So I am hearing that this board policy does cover the concern that Angela expressed. I'd like to suggest that we move it to the consent agenda as written, unless anyone else has any significant concerns about that. Okay, so let's move board policy 2735 to the consent agenda, Board of Education member travel. And if you sleep on it for 2 weeks and you feel like we really want to add something to it, we can pull it at the meeting, the board meeting. So let's go on to board policy 2740, board member education.
So board member education, this also doesn't have a current lane policy analogous to it. It's a policy whereby the board commits to supporting the continuing education of its members. So it's encourages study sessions, reading materials, supports conference attendance, and other activities that support board member education. And that's really all it did. It just commits the board to being committed to educating its members.
Okay, any comments or questions for board members? Angela?
I don't know why I'm so talkative about policies, but I guess I get all fired up when they come up. So I think my question is about the Board of Education will engage in study sessions. I'm not sure how we define study sessions. I'm not sure that I've ever participated in one. And so I'm worried that if we adopted this policy, I'd be immediately out of compliance.
I would argue the work sessions we do every month are study sessions.
Ooh.
You're not making decisions. I would think it's just, anything where you're discussing information related to the college would qualify. I don't think it's a defined term. So I think it's open to fairly broad interpretation, but we could change that to work sessions if it makes folks feel better.
I would feel better about that. When I see study sessions, I'm thinking late nights at the library. And
Nobody wants that.
Steve?
Well, I agree with Mike that our board meetings, there are parts of our board meetings, whether they're the official meeting or the work session, that qualify as educational or study. But I don't think that we would want to specify that we are mandating ourselves to have work sessions once a month. We might make changes in the future that whereby all of that is compressed into one monthly meeting, for example, whereby all of that's where we have action items and discussion items. So to be clear, I wouldn't want us to have a policy that mandated a monthly work meeting.
Angela?
could we just take out the sessions and say that we'll engage in study? Or that we'll use them?
So we have a suggestion there. I'm going to go to Austin and see what he's thinking about, and then we'll come back to this thinking.
Just wanted to ask, like, retreats, are those considered study or work sessions in regards to this policy, Michael?
Again, I don't think study sessions is a defined term. So study sessions means whatever you want it to mean. So I would say retreats would definitely be included in the term either study sessions or conference attendance.
Okay,
yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I'll put myself in the queue. I do know that we have rarely used the term study session as a board in our own practice. I do agree with Steve. I wouldn't want to put in policy that we are establishing work sessions. I think that could complicate things for future boards. The word that we have often referred to as a board and used routinely is professional development. And we could substitute professional development for study session. Beyond that, I think we do have a lot of feedback on this, and we could workshop it a little bit and bring it back in the consent agenda with some potential changes around that word. I see. Steve?
Michael, can you just give us your professional opinion? I think of, whatever it was, study sessions and professional development as two very different things. Are they synonymous in your mind? Is one equal? Is one a fine substitute for the other relative? If we were to try to make an analogous policy with the OCCA?
I would say that they could mean the same thing, but they could be different. So I wouldn't use them as exact synonyms. When I think of professional development, I would think more of the support conference attendance would be more of a professional development item. But I could see a study session being professional development, but I could also see one not being, if you're talking about a specific issue. Study sessions could be changed to so many things. You could say, we'll engage in robust discussions of college related topics, which you do every time you guys meet. And that wouldn't lock you into any specific type of meeting or schedule or anything. Every time you meet, you have a robust, detailed discussion of whatever the topic is, and it's related to the college. So it could be something like that. I mean, I think Lisa's right. It probably, you guys just kind of need to noodle on it and let me know how you want to go, and we'll change it up. I don't think it really is. This isn't a big issue it doesn't really change it that much if we wordsmith it a little.
Thank you. And I'm fine with study session. I'm just noodling here.
Yeah, right.
People's feedback. So, Angela?
I just came to the conclusion that I was not fine with study session because it just doesn't sound like something that we have historically talked about. It's not the wording that we've used. It just doesn't sound like a policy for this board in my mind. So I would be okay with taking it out altogether. I'd be okay with changing it to professional development. In short, I'm comfortable with the whole policy. Study sessions just seems a little bit off to me, but it doesn't seem like a deal breaker. I would like to see it change, but I'm not really passionate about it, despite all the talking I've done on the subject.
Holly, did you have a thought on that? Or are you saying move it forward?
Yeah, I was actually thinking the exact same thing before you brought it up, Chair Fragola, that professional development sounds better than study session. So I agree with you and Angela.
All right, well, I think we will take a look at this in the interim with Michael Blade's support, and it'll be in the consent agenda with a possible recommendation, and we might just need to work it out in the board meeting. So we'll move that one forward for a little bit of workshopping, and it will be in our consent agenda at the board meeting. If anybody would like to support the effort to workshop it a little bit in collaboration with Michael Blade, you can let me know. So let's go on to the last board policy, 2745, Board of Education Self-Evaluation. Mike?
All right, so this one, I have to give credit to Trustee Van Kraus. She is a bird dog with the language, because she found in current board policy 360, one sentence, which it's a fairly lengthy board policy, one sentence, and I had skipped over it on purpose because because the whole board policy 360 really has, except for that sentence, has really nothing to do with self-evaluation. And I knew that you wouldn't want to throw out the entire policy and replace it with this policy. But there is a sentence in board policy 360 that says the board will monitor and regularly discuss the board's own process and performance. Then there's a subsection that says self-monitoring will include an annual comparison of board activity and discipline to its governance process and board staff relationship policies, which could be construed as self-evaluation. So I am bringing this 2745 to you. I think it's a good policy. I think it needs to be codified in your policies. I don't think anything in 2745 conflicts with the statement in BP 360. I suspect we're not going to get to BP 360 as a comparison board policy to an OCCA one, since we're moving on from the board related section in the OCCA policies. So in the end, we may have to go back to the ones we didn't hit with an analogous policy, and we may look at that one. So there's a whole, again, it's a fairly lengthy policy and there's a lot of other stuff in it, but I just want you to be aware that there is that little small section in that, I think it's 11 sentences or 11 sections, 11 bullet points. And this is one bullet point of 11. So it does talk about the fact that you will monitor and regularly discuss the board's own process and performance. And then I think 2745 gives you the vehicle for doing that. There are two, if you'll notice in this board policy, there are two things that probably need to be decided. The first one, it says a committee of the Board of Education shall be appointed in, and then there's kind of a blank, and that needs to be a month to determine the instrument or process to be used in the self-evaluation. So it's saying that you should form a committee to come up with whatever your board self-evaluation tool is going to be, and how you're going to process through that tool, and what month are you going to appoint that committee. And I would suggest that your self-evaluation is going to be towards the end of the fiscal year usually. So you'd probably want to appoint that committee towards, fairly early in the process, no later than the end of the calendar year. So that's the first thing you probably ought to come up with a decision on, if possible.
Rosie?
Thank you very much. I don't think we need this policy. I think we have this covered in board policy 360. We've never failed to do a board self-evaluation, and I think we're set.
Anyone else? Steve?
Well, I'm just trying to get clear. I haven't read the policies. I'll admit that up front. I'm probably not likely to be the person who does. Rosie, are you saying that we have something else that covers this? This is just simply duplicative?
Rosie?
Yes, I am. In the time I've served on the board, we've never failed to do an annual self-evaluation. It's alluded to in policy 360, as Angela pointed out. And I don't think we need just all this extra special appointed committee by a certain date. Historically, the board chair leads the charge on ensuring that the board conducts a self-evaluation. We've sometimes done it in conjunction with ACCT nationwide survey process that was very enlightening, very helpful. And other times we've done it in conjunction with an OCCA similar practice, and sometimes we've done it just on our own. We have an instrument we've used. Some board members have thought it was worthless. Other board members thought it was adequate. I don't think we need all kinds of long, elaborate committee processes to pull this off.
I'm with you. But if we have a long-standing history, and it's even alluded to elsewhere, then I agree. We don't need to get drowned in more of this stuff.
And I would also point out, this is not legally required, advised, or even recommended as good practice. So I think this is one, if you feel comfortable with where you are, we could easily just say, nope, we don't need this one.
Is there anyone else who would like to weigh in on that? Angela?
I think I'm aligned with what Rosie and Steve have expressed. Thank you. I think maybe I have a sort of future problem for us, maybe not problems, but suppose we come across more policies that have some intersections with elements of BP 360, and we decide we want to adopt those or something like this. I'm wondering, I guess, where does BP 360, as it is now, fit in with our sort of future, the structure that we're moving toward with policies? Will it continue to exist? Or if we end up scrapping parts of it, will we lose this part that we've all just said that we wanted and we wanted to keep in places with other policies? And I don't think we need to answer that tonight. I just want to make sure that we thinking about making sure we don't lose things that we've expressed an interest in keeping.
Great. Thank you for that feedback. And I see Marge has a response.
Yeah, I recall when all this started, we always assumed there would be policies that we had that you liked and you wanted to keep. And Angela, as I recall, we would just renumber these to fit the numbering system of the new system.
Okay, so I'm hearing the idea being recommended that we will not adopt board policy 2745. And so I am going to suggest that we not move it to the consent agenda, and unless anybody is opposed to that, and we could have a bigger conversation at the board meeting. Michael, does that work?
Yeah, and I would just one last thing I would say to Angela's point is, again, this is the end of the sort of board, the section on the board. So we're moving on to general institution. There may be some things that might creep into 360, but I don't think there's going to be anything going forward that's going to lead us to scrap 360. And I'll make a point that if we do decide to do that, we need to have that maintain that one little section as its own separate policy or something to make sure that it's in there somewhere.
So Michael's going to keep tracking it for us. Awesome. All right. So looks like we're moving 3 of those to the consent agenda and scrapping one of them. Great. Good work. So that brings us to closing items, future meeting dates and agenda items. Our next regular board meeting is November 17th. And then our next work session is December 1st. And on December 15th, we have a regular board meeting. I did want to remind the board that starting in January, we will be moving into the adopted flip on the work session and board meeting schedule. So starting in January, we will have board meetings the 3rd week and work sessions the 1st week. However, in January, we have a little bit different of a schedule because of the board retreat, which we have on the 22nd of January. Angela.
I had a question about policies still. I'm sorry, I got my hand up late.
Okay.
I was wondering if, having reread and discussed BP 360 a bit this evening, do we get to mark it reviewed? Have we reviewed it tonight?
Michael Blade, do we get to mark board policy 360 as reviewed?
So first of all, it's not due to be reviewed, but I hesitate to mark it reviewed because we looked at one sentence of 11. So I would say no, I wouldn't, I mean, we could do it, but I wouldn't feel terribly good about it because we only looked at a tiny little portion of it, but it's not due. So we're okay there.
Okay, great.
Comment, if there's space for comments this evening.
Yeah, totally. This is the time.
I just wanted to say a huge thank you to the staff for the vaccination system and all of the manpower, people power that has gone into, reviewing everything. It sounds like there were some long hours for a lot of folks and just a lot of really hard work put into this. And I really appreciate it. So big thank you to you all.
Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, seeing none, I am going to adjourn the November 3rd work session of the LCC board. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.